We are a church that is growing, and with that, we have a lot of people who are engaging in faith new for the first time. We have a lot of people who are kind of like kicking the tires on faith and saying that they, while they're not in yet, they want to know what it means to be a part of it. We have people who have been in church their whole life who are saying, I'm finding something more. I want more. And this question comes up all the time. How do I grow spiritually? How do I mature in my spiritual life? What do I do? How do I do this? And today we're going to talk about 3 spiritual growth truths. And to do this, we're going to look in John, the book of John, chapter 3. Now, we've been following Jesus and his parables and his stories. Today we're going to shift to another preacher, a competing preacher who was competing with Jesus. His name's John the Baptist. Now, he's called John the Baptist, not because he wears a tie and eats church casseroles at potlucks and doesn't drink alcohol. He's called John the Baptist because he baptizes. Some of you will get that joke later. And his thing is to baptize. He talks about the one, the Messiah who is to come. And he says, he calls them to conviction. He calls them into the water to be baptized to prepare for Jesus. Now, in John chapter 3, we start. It says, then Jesus and his disciples, they left the big city of Jerusalem into the Judean countryside. And Jesus spent some time there with them, the people, baptizing them. We have Jesus leaving the big city where most of the religious movements happen, and he goes out into the, like he leaves Carbondale and goes to Marble, you know? He goes off out into the countryside, but what we see here is his ministry is gaining momentum. It's kind of at the early part of it. Next is this. At this time, John the Baptist was baptizing at Ainon near Salim because there was plenty of water there. And people, they just kept coming for baptism. So while Jesus has begun his ministry and his baptizing, John the Baptist, it's his primary ministry. Like, this is what he does. And people are still flocking to him. In fact, we know this. He says he chose a place with plenty of water. You only choose a place with plenty of water if you need plenty of room for all that God's going to do and all the people. So John the Baptist, we know his ministry is at the pinnacle, the peak. It's effective. So we have these 2 powerful preachers, one who's established and one who is rising. And we see a growing response to Jesus in his ministry. We notice that neither one of them are in the city. They're out there in the countryside. And there's a very simple point here that I want to make. It might seem painfully obvious, but I want to make this. It's easy to skip over. It's easy, but I want us to consider a few things. Because what would it take to hear Jesus' sermon in this culture, in this time? If anyone wanted to go hear Jesus, if they wanted to respond to his message, they couldn't stay wherever they are. They couldn't be in Jerusalem on the couch and catch the live stream. We see you live stream. Hi. If anyone wanted to come hear Jesus' message and respond, they had to leave, even no matter where they are, get up and go out into the countryside and travel. And they would do this by foot. You're walking half a day. Half a day to a full day's journey just to hear a preacher. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine traveling, walking a day to go hear someone preach a sermon? I can. I long for that. No, I'm kidding. The amount of inconvenience and effort it would require somebody, they have to leave work, leave their home, leave their convenience, leave everything, and walk out into the Judean countryside to find Jesus. It's foreign to us. If we're really honest, it's hard to even imagine changing like a service time to some other service but a half day's walk, a full day's walk to come near to Jesus in this culture, they had to purposefully, intentionally leave what they were doing and pursue Jesus. They couldn't stay in their normal routine and just wish, I wish Jesus would come to my house. Those who desired spiritual change, spiritual moments with Jesus, would have to seek him, encounter him. And I want to challenge us today with this first simple point. I want to call us to be seekers, to seek Jesus, to pursue him. That we would be people who are willing to leave our normal routine and pursue and seek God. Did you know that the spirit is the deepest part of you, what our spirit most often longs for, if we're honest? Your spirit was made for a deep divine connection. And so what we long for more than anything is for that spirit connection, to have an encounter, an experience with God, an experience where we feel God quicken our heart, our soul. In fact, encountering God in your life is one of the greatest, most life-changing things that could ever happen. It's that moment where there's a tangible, experiential moment, and it clarifies life. It inspires us. It convicts us. There's nothing like it. And I want to ask you a question you can answer honestly. Have you had an authentic, real encounter with God at some point in your life? And it's okay if not, but just ask yourself, have I had a moment that was authentic, deep, spirit, soul level moment where I felt the quickening of God? Have you experienced divine truth at a deep level? And if you have, when was the last time you encountered God? When was the last time that your spirit was quickened with a desire to know him more? When was the last time your heart was moved with passion? When was the last time that you were captivated, your mind was captivated by wonder? It's like, oh my goodness. When was the last time perhaps your emotions were awakened and you had that sacred moment of knowing God's presence? When was the last time you had the sense that there's just so much more to this world and reality than your flesh and blood, because you experienced something so much deeper and far beyond? Truly, when was the last time? You see, encountering God's presence, whether in prayer or in worship or in his word or in a conversation with somebody else, these moments are rare. But did you know they are available? Did you know that you are called to them? You're called to encounter God in your life. These moments, though, are not for the indifferent. They're not. The person who sees the beauty of the mountaintop from the peak had to climb to get there. The person who got baptized here in John 3, they had to travel and leave their routine to go find Jesus. The person who laid their past life down in the baptismal water had to stand up and walk forward. The person who leaves their sin and past at the foot of the cross comes close. And for many of us, we need to admit something, that it is our normal, everyday routine that's the very thing holding us back from spiritual growth. Our normal, everyday life is the very thing holding us back from spiritual growth. We have scheduled any new encounter with God out of our life. With so many notifications in our world, how do we hear the whisper of God? There are places when it talks about God's voice, and it says, the word is demama. It means silent whisper. That God's voice to your spirit would be a silent whisper so deep within you. And how do we hear that amidst the notifications? How do we hear that amidst all the noise and busyness? There's an allegory about a man who was traveling. This man was traveling through a dark forest. He was cold. He was lost. And as he's lost and as he's troubled and looking, he sees on the path ahead, he sees the amber glow and flicker, that there was a fire somewhere up there. And so he begins to come closer. He follows the path, this hard to follow path, and he gets in through a little clearing, and there is a fire right there in the middle of this dark forest. And as he comes closer and he sits near it, it warms his body. But it does more than that. It begins to warm his soul and his spirit in a way that he never imagined. He's restored deep within as the flame renews his heart. For the first time in a long time, he feels peace. So much peace, he lays down right there near that fire and falls deeply asleep. And the next morning, he wakes up with his face warmed by that flame. Now, he's decided, this is everything that I've wanted. This is so much different than walking around in the dark forest cold. He builds a temporary shelter and he vows, I'm never leaving this flame for the rest of my days. He lives a month there, right there by the warm flame and fire, and each night falling asleep with his spirit and body just warmed. But the next morning he wakes up and the familiar warmth on his face is gone. He looks up and the fire is out. There's ashes, it's gone. And he looks around the clearing and there's no sign of it. But there, etched, handwritten in the dirt, is an arrow that says, "Seek me," pointing down the path. And at that moment, the man has two choices. He can take the words from the fire. He can take the words to heart. He can leave the comfort of his little shelter. He can leave the comfort of his memories of all the warm times they had, and he can strike out and search. Or he can stay where he is. He can ponder and just think back over the warm moments of the past. Maybe another traveler comes along and they can reminisce about all the fire they had and the warmth that they had. But he's not leaving. He's decided he's a settler. This is where he was awakened to truth and warmth. And so he says, "I'm gonna set up a life here." And he builds a permanent shelter over his temporary little place. In fact, he sets up a museum there and he gives tours every Sunday morning at 10:30 to anyone who would come to talk about the fire. And anyone who stops by gets to hear about it. And some people are inspired and some people stay there and they set up a life and hope that it returns. And he lives the rest of his days there waiting for the fire. But now and then he reminisces and thinks back. Maybe I, what did that note say? Maybe I should have set out. Maybe I should have followed the arrow. Maybe I should have followed that. Maybe I should have laced up my boots and followed those handwritten instructions and pursued the warmth of the light that I had experienced. Maybe I should push out in faith and risk leaving the shelter and the place that I've built in the cold to find something new. The allegory isn't perfect, but here's the point. Am I so settled in my place of comfort, of what has moved in my past, that I'm unwilling to strike out? Have I created a spiritual set of beliefs that are so settled that they insulate me? That even when God gives moments of clarity and warmth, I'm unwilling to uproot myself and pursue him further because I like it here. Have I become comfortable in the faith that I've constructed here in this place? And for many of us, we have chosen to settle in places that God once moved in our past. We worshiped once 20 years ago and we've never moved past that way of worship. We went to camp and threw a stick in the fire and felt God thrill us at one point in our youth, but all we do is think back, I wish I could still feel that. Perhaps you came to salvation decades ago, or you had a spiritual awakening recently, or you're feeling God stoke something new. And perhaps there was something in your past that you were astounded by, and you soaked it up, but the fire and the passion of that encounter, if you're honest, is faded over the months and the years, and the busyness, and the life. And the same fire that you once had, if you're really honest, it's not there anymore. It's not there. And we have a choice. We can follow his word and spiritually pursue him, or we can let our faith stay just as it is and settle down and reminisce about the good old days as our faith becomes old and cold and stale. Sadly, many of us have a faith that never grew beyond the first early encounters we had, or that baptism we had. And we woke up one morning and the passion was different and it didn't feel the same. The songs didn't quite take us there like they used to. But instead of pursuing, we settled in. Instead of following, we simply fell back into our old routine. We are called to pursue Jesus spiritually. We're called to step out in faith beyond our comfort zone. And so often, it is our constructed comfort zone of our life that is the very thing keeping us from fresh fire and fresh faith. We're called to step out. We're called to follow him into areas that are challenging and difficult, but rewarding. And the question is, after all this, are we actively pursuing God? Are we actively pursuing God, or have we set up a settled life in a comfort zone? Are we willing to step out of our normal routine and pursue him? Are we making room in our schedule to encounter him? Does God have any room in your schedule? And people always say, I just don't have time. I don't have time for that small group. I don't have time. Listen, can I just be really honest? One of the only things in life you can actually control is your priorities. We make time for what is most precious to us. Am I carving out time for who I say is most precious to me? This is as practical and as easy as simply turning off the radio or the podcast in the car and choosing instead to pray out loud and listen. Now you're like, man, pray out loud. Listen, on Highway 82, everyone's crazy. You can talk out loud to God and you'll fit right in. Most of them are screaming at somebody else, right? Honestly, we can find places and make sacred spots in our life where God's presence can speak to us, where we can hear from him, be strengthened, find the peace, get the wisdom that we need for business and life and future. It can be as simple as putting down our phone and making some room for God to speak in our life. Instead of living our brain from 15-second video to 15-second video and saying, God, I want to hear from you today. This is leaving our normal comfort zone routine and striking out to pursue him. You see, the busyness of our lives, and I'm as guilty as everybody, the busyness of our lives speed us right through our day and then our week, and we get back here and we're like, okay, I have 1 hour, God, and it's yours, and I haven't thought about you the rest of the week. The noise of our society drowns out that silent whisper of God. The concerns of our culture and of our circumstances, they dominate our mind. We don't bring them to him in prayer. The first principle of spiritual growth is this: pursue God's presence boldly. Seek him, pursue him, and make a practice of making space, stepping out of your comfort zone to seek a fresh encounter with him. Don't settle for a stale faith. Open up your schedule for some prayer or worship or read his word or that group and meet him and make room for him. Become a seeker. Boldly seek him. And here's the truth. If you're coasting, you're not growing. When you coast, which direction do you always coast? Downhill. If we're coasting spiritually, we're coasting downhill. And for some of us, it's simply putting on the brakes and making a decision outside of our normal routine to pursue. Back to John chapter 3. John's baptizing. It says that the religious leaders, all the religious folk got together and they debated with John's disciples. John has disciples who followed him for years. They began to debate, and so much so that John's disciples were troubled by this religious talk, and they came to John, their rabbi, their teacher, and they say, Rabbi, the one you told us was the Messiah, he's also baptizing people. And everybody's going to him instead of us. Like, Rabbi, this is kind of our thing. You're John the Baptist. He's Jesus of Nazareth. Doesn't have Baptist in his name. See, John the Baptist's own followers are wondering about this Jesus guy because their ministry is the biggest show in town. They have to get places where there's plenty of water, but now there's some holy competition, and people are going to Jesus. And John's response is this: no one can receive anything unless God gives it from heaven. And I'm not the one. I'm not the Messiah. I'm not him. I'm here to prepare the way for him. I'm filled with joy at his success. He must increase, and I must decrease. Whew. John's answer to their competitive, selfish question is this: listen, guys, I told you I'm not the one. I'm here to prepare the way for the one. And now guess what? He's here. He must get more popular. People must know his name way more than my name. His final words were, Jesus must increase, I must decrease. 6 simple words that to live by this would take a lifetime. That my way, my kingdom, my desire, myself must decrease. And Jesus' way in me, his mission, Jesus in my life should increase. That people should know more about Jesus when they're around me because I'm choosing to make him known and popular. I must decrease and he must increase. The second principle today for spiritual growth is this: depend on God more in your life, because spiritual growth is increased dependence on God. Catch that. Spiritual growth is simply increasing dependence on God. Increased dependence. Now, this is tough. In our American culture, we love independence. Now, we celebrate it. We value it. We strive for it. In fact, the mark of physical maturity is increased physical independence. But you're telling me the mark of spiritual maturity is increased spiritual dependence? You see, spiritual growth is knowing more and more how much I truly need God in my life. Have you ever had something break in your life so badly? You ever had things fall so terribly that you realize you're just not in control of anything the way you thought? And you realize the only thing I can really control in this life is my priorities and my attitude. Other than that, not much. Increasing spiritual dependence, knowing how much you need God for your life, is maturity. Let's take it farther. In my character, for my character to grow in integrity, I need to depend on God more. What about in those places of vice or addiction in our life? Any place there is addiction, it is the mark of an abnormal independence of my own desire. So to have freedom in those areas, increased dependence on God in those places is what sets me free. Not just more independence, more willpower, just white knuckling it. That's the fallacy. That's what fails us. To have greater integrity in our private world, in my private life, I find I need to depend on God more. And there are places in our private life where I've depended on myself for decades and it's gotten me nowhere other than where I am. Oh, I need God more than I ever knew. For our marriages to flourish, I have to have increasing dependence on God's grace and peace and love and strength. So the fruit of that would be from my spouse, my wife, and that my marriage would be built on those things. Increasing dependence on God in a marriage is what builds a strong marriage. What about raising kids? Did you know God entrusted our children to us, but He knows them. He knows their destiny. He knows their hearts better than we ever will. And greater increased spiritual dependence on God as a parent is saying, God, I need your wisdom on these kids. I need your wisdom and insight on how to parent them. Not more independence on myself. I need more of you. For me as a pastor, I need to depend on God more and more as a leader. For you as a business person, it's learning you need to depend more and more on God's wisdom and favor in your business. It's recognizing that anywhere in my life where I'm relying on my own power and my own purpose, it will lead to frustration and failure. It just will. And in all areas of my life, the more I'm finding to connect myself with God's power and God's purpose, I grow. I am resourced by heaven in those places. And some of the hardest days of my life are coming face to face with the fact that my own purpose and my own power took me as far as it can take me. Or worse, it took me to places I never wanted to go. Have you ever tried it your way and you finally gotten to the end of yourself and you have that conversation in the mirror, just defeated? One of the deepest truths of life is that while we value our independence, it is spiritual dependence on God that maturity and strength and growth happens. The more I realize my deep need for God, the more I grow. You want to grow spiritually? There's no other path than increasingly spiritually to being dependent. Back to John 3. John the Baptist, his disciples, they're competitive. They're jealous of Jesus' ministry. And John reveals to them who Jesus is. He points to Jesus, but he continues. He says this, listen guys, Jesus has come from heaven and he's greater than any of us. Any of us. He's sent by God. Guys, he speaks God's word, for God gives him the Spirit without limit. God has put everything in Jesus' hands, and anyone who believes in him and God's Son will have eternal life. And there's an important principle that happened here. Something John the Baptist did that we need to take to heart. You see, John's disciples were not happy. They were becoming less important, and they didn't like it. Let's be clear, though. They're good people. They've left their life to follow God's prophet. They're great people. They're good people. But like all of us, they have selfishness. They're out in the wilderness and they've dedicated themselves to God, but like what's happening here? When Jesus began to rise above them, their selfishness was revealed. And I bet before they went and talked to John the Baptist, I bet they talked amongst themselves. It says there was that religious debate going on, and they're like over here gossiping. Can you believe they're with Jesus? Who is this Jesus anyway? And we can't have this. They even have that guy Peter over there. You know who Peter is? You know what Peter was doing? Like they're just gossiping and talking about it. Let's take it to John. John will set it straight. John's gonna set this straight, and he did, but not the way they expected. Instead of saying what they desired, he said what needed to be said. And this is an important and valuable example for us in our life. John the Baptist shows us the power of community with people who are courageous enough to tell us the truth. Capital T, absolute truth, not relative, my truth, what I believe, the truth. Because if we're surrounded by people who love gossip and gossip with us, if we're surrounded by people who encourage our selfishness, if we're talking to someone who doesn't cheer on our marriage, but actually even maybe sides against our spouse, if we're friends with those who don't call us on our weakness, then we miss out on the growth. We miss out, and those very friends who we're going to, they can encourage us to make very bad decisions. John the Baptist was approached by people he loved, and they brought selfishness to him. And what did he do? He pointed them to Jesus. He pointed them to Jesus. You got it wrong. Jesus is the one. His way is better. Look to him. This is vital. I need more. You need. We need friends, mentors, small group leaders, church family who will do this. And this is the third principle for spiritual maturity. Surround yourself with truth tellers. Have some people that love you enough to be honest with you and who will point you to Jesus. Not point at the other person, not point about how you're right, but point you to Jesus. Who will point us to Jesus in seasons of selfishness, who will point us to Jesus in seasons of hardship and difficult, when there's not much hope and there's not much life, and they point to the light. In our character, they have the courage to call us out on our sin and behavior and point us to Jesus. In our marriages, who love us enough to tell us hard things and point us to Jesus. In our brokenness, friends who will point us to the truth in strength. In our comfort zone, to have people around you in your small group who will call you out in faith, who will call you out of your comfort zone, who will partner with you out of your comfort zone. In our work, friends who will be willing to challenge us instead of complaining and gossiping about our coworkers and bosses, to go forth and actually love God and love people and put the word into practice. Be around people who will tell you the truth. And many of us are looking to grow deeper in our faith, to grow deeper in our spiritual life. These three principles right here: pursue God's presence boldly, pursue him, be willing to step out, be willing to try something new. It is as simple as tomorrow, set 15 minutes aside and read John 1. You're in control of your priorities and your time. Set 15 minutes aside, read John 1, and then pray. It might be hard. It's gonna be hard to carve out some time. Put your phone away. Get a little blank piece of paper to write the things that come to mind that you need to work on later, because you will be bombarded. Your brain is set to notifications. 15 minutes, read John 1. Turn the radio off on your commute. Pray out loud to him. Adjust your life to seek him. Number 2, depend on God, knowing that increased dependence is spiritual maturity. Relying less on our own strength. Application: where are you in a difficult place? Where are you in a place right now that's hard? Where are you in the divorce, the diagnosis, the brokenness, the depression, the work issue, the marriage issue? Tomorrow, set 15 minutes aside and seek God on that issue. Talk to him about it. Tell him your heartbreak. Tell him your anger. Tell him your needs. But bring it to him. Carve out 15 minutes and bring what you have to him and then receive from him. You know what I do? I go on a walk. I can't just sit there quietly. I wish I could and get into it. I'm on a walk. And here's my challenge. Leave my earbuds at home. Because if I have them, it's an easy tap to music or a podcast. And it's so easy to do that. I just want some time to connect with my Father, to honestly talk about the decision or the difficulty. Number 3, surround yourself with truth tellers. Build relationships with people who love you enough to speak biblical truth and point you to Jesus. Do you have friends like this? Do you have friends who courageously do this? If not, get them. And I'm just gonna be really blunt right here. I'm gonna say something as a pastor I hope you trust me with, and that is this. I believe every person in any way involved in the Orchard should be in a small group. Oh, geez. Oh, come on, a small group. I don't got time for that. You do. And I know you've been in one before, and I know it was terrible, and you didn't like it, and you'll never do it again. Whatever it is, I know it. We all fight through it. I want to challenge you. I believe each of us should be in a small group of people also trying to step out of their comfort zone, getting honest about their stuff, discussing truth, having Christ in it. Listen, men's groups, women's groups, Bible study, young adult groups, youth groups, the couples group. God designed you for community. He never said go do the Christian life alone. Never. He said, get in community. And if you don't have it, you're missing out on a transformative way that God declared in his word as truth for you to live spiritually. I'm just gonna be honest. It's that important. So application, I was told by the guys, scan the QR code on the seat in front of you and sign up for a small group. They'll send you some information. If you don't know how that works, go to the welcome desk. However it is, get involved in a small group. Try something new. Step out in faith. On Thursdays, when we have our worship nights, adjust your schedule and be there. Try something new. Instead of staying in our same routine and comfort zone, let's be the church that steps out. Spiritual growth is something that we want to pursue as a church, Orchard. God's bringing people here, but he doesn't want us to remain the same and shallow. He's calling up us to a deep, robust faith that has roots, that holds us in the storm, that holds you in the divorce, that holds you in the depression and anxiety. Whatever you're going through, he's calling you to something that is real and tangible. Not some religious conformity, but a real faith that is robust and true. Step out of your comfort zone and pursue him. Find people who tell the truth and get around them and depend on him more and more. As we go into communion, as we worship, I want to challenge you. Today, there are some of you who need prayer, but the comfort zone of your chair says, don't get out of there and go get prayer from the prayer team. Try it. Come let some of these people pray over you. Come let some of the pastors pray over you. Try it. During worship, you may have worshiped the same way for decades. Try something new. Sing a different way. Worship, push in, pursue. For those of you just checking out the Orchard, know this, we're a place that wants real faith, and we invite you to engage in it that way. Let's take communion. You can go find one of the communion guides, go back to your seats, whatever it is. But let's pursue his presence and pursue spiritual maturity as we worship. Oh, one more thing. Sorry. My wife, who hears from God, she told me one time, she said, God is doing something here at this church. And he's moving people to get out of their chairs and comfort zones and get baptized. Why don't you just always put water in the baptismal? Because you never can plan when God's gonna work. I said, that's a really good idea. I wish I'd thought of that. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna just always have it ready. Because we realize, and you've probably been in here, when people get up in their street clothes and get baptized, we want to provide space for that. Because I don't ever know when God's going to move. And if you're here today and you want to be baptized, to commit your life, recommit your life, or declare Jesus, I'm going to be right here. Come find me. I would love to lead you to Jesus. I would love to lead you in baptism. We're a church where you can step out of your comfort zone and pursue Jesus. Let's do that.